So there I sat, on my father's knee, 8-year-old Adrian with dusty blonde hair, ready to receive age-old wisdom. Adrian, my dad said, "You must think before you act." There it was, instant enlightenment. The only problem was, the police were still at the neighbor's house where I just tried to shoot the kid down the street with my slingshot. 2 decades later, I'd like to think that simple scolding planted the seed for a life of purpose. If you're like me, when you hear the phrase radically change the course of history, you think of Gandhi, Steve Jobs, Mother Teresa. Oh, you're thinking of Anna and Elsa, aren't you? I knew it. Today, I'd like to introduce you to someone you never thought would radically change the course of history. Someone who is the most powerful force on the planet. You. Your thoughts and actions, no matter how big or small, matter. Not only do they matter, they add up and they ripple out. My doctor says it best. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Dr. Seuss, that is. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. Humanity is evolving rapidly. We're faced with more unprecedented change than any point in history. What if, as Dr. Seuss points out, we cultivated our thoughts and actions with a little more care and compassion? Our thoughts and actions are like a raindrop falling into a pond, the kerplunk rippling out. This is what it would look like if we lived here alone. In reality, every day on this planet is more like a rainstorm. Our thousands of drops splashing and mashing with everyone else's all around the world, each one being redirected and influenced. Another way to describe it is the butterfly effect, best known in the saying, "A butterfly flapping its wings in Mexico can cause a hurricane in China." Sage philosophers might call this interconnectedness, or today, the I inside of the we. The result of understanding our I in the we is profound. We grasp immediately that our economic systems, our ecosystems, our social systems, and our own personal well-being are all interconnected. Can we strive to get rid of actions that harm our collective well-being? Can we cultivate actions that will build a better world? I'm a social entrepreneur. I'm passionate about building things that improve people's lives. More so, I'm passionate about the goodness in each individual to bring change in the world. You're thinking, Adrian, you're shooting people with slingshots, now you're talking about goodness? Come on. A lot has changed since then. After graduating college, I landed a job with one of the world's largest banks. I was checking off all the boxes for success. Steady paycheck, 60-hour work week, 18 pairs of shoes. Yet somehow I felt empty. The market would go up, people were happy. The market would go down and people would panic. I just didn't get it. I quietly yearned for something more. As fate would have it, my cube mate Terry threw a book on my desk. "Here, read this, it'll change your life." Oh, okay. As I flipped through the pages, I received my first invitation to radically change the course of history. The author deeply questioned the status quo. He redefined work from something we do to make money to something we do that should fulfill us, something that shouldn't feel like work. He also argued for something called mini retirements, or taking extended vacations throughout life. So after 13 months of working, I retired. Thankfully, I grew up with a mother who said, "You can be anything you want to be." I don't know if retired is one of those things. So I jettisoned most of my stuff and signed up to teach English in China, where I began earning $800 a month. Upon arriving in China, I started to find the things I was yearning for. I taught some of my students ultimate frisbee, and they ended up creating one of the first high school teams in China. I launched my Olympic bid in badminton, but quickly pulled out after scoring only 1 point against Justin, the senior class champion. And I met Yujun, my favorite student, who incessantly asked questions about the US like, what are hippies and why are they crunchy? This is the interconnectedness, the I and the we, how our lives are shaped by other people's, just a few small examples. While in China, I also brought with me the book Vagabonding by Rolf Potts, coincidentally mentioned by the previously mentioned life-changing book. Within was another ripple of inspiration that sent me on a whirlwind journey. So, I left southern China after teaching English and went north. You should go to Mongolia, Tim said, as we ate dinner in a back alley in Beijing. Tim, a small-framed, intense Brit, had just come from there and highly recommended it. I replied, where's Mongolia? And how do I get there? 4 days later, I was rattling along the Trans-Mongolian Railway from Beijing to Ulaanbaatar. On the train, Heidi and Yao asked if I wanted to ride horses for 2 weeks throughout Mongolia. Okay. I got to put my high school wrestling skills to the test as I joined in the Mongolian national pastime and earned the respect of local nomads. Well, almost. After Mongolia, I hopped trains and buses to western China, where I traveled through disappearing Tibetan regions. As I walked through a cold, dusty town at sunrise, I came face to face with a Tibetan woman whose smile is seared in my heart for all of eternity. If only for an instant, I felt like I understood the meaning of life. Just an instant. Shortly after, I met Gonga Sering and his beautiful wife, after his 3 boys invited me into their home to be their English teacher. Gonga asked me to stay in their home, pointing to the phrase in my Tibetan to English phrasebook, don't refuse. I didn't. By now, you can probably see where this is going, right? I'll fast forward a few months. Bus breaks down, picked up by dump truck, naturally. Israelis in dump truck mentioned Nepal. Where's Nepal? Flight from Bangkok to Nepal, walking toward Mount Everest. Travel goes like that. After 10 days of walking among the most magical mountains on the planet, my 2 new trekking companions, Andy and Ivica, and I walked into a 3-building village at 15,000 feet in the middle of nowhere. We were invited in by a wrinkled Sherpa woman who floated among the smoke as she heated water for us. The air was thin, and I was hungry. Then, the cracker incident. I pulled out my peanut butter and crackers, but today, instead of the usual, I sprinkled savory spices on them. The mountains were speaking to me, or so I thought. Andy and Ivica watched in dismay as I began devouring, at this point, the single greatest combination of foods on the planet. The brain does funny things without oxygen. The light bulb went off, though, and 3 weeks later, I landed back in the States with $80 in my bank account. I grabbed some odd jobs, moved in with my patient sister, churned my first batch of what I called Asian Jazz peanut butter, and began selling at local farmers markets. 5 years later, our company makes peanut butter and almond butter that helps feed children with malnutrition through our BuyOne, FeedOne business model, and gives back to the world the same kindness and love that each of these strangers offered me along the way. I don't know if it's too much to say, but I'm going to say it. The woman's smile in Tibet is helping feed children in Guatemala. Our lives are a byproduct of our actions and the actions of others. In this moment, they are forming the course of history. It calls us to a higher purpose, a profound one, and rewards us with deep satisfaction and contentment. How do we embrace interconnectedness in our everyday lives without trekking around Asia? I'd like to suggest 3 steps. Listen, consider your impact, and take action. Step 1, listen. Just observe. It's like listening to your favorite song. The more you get into it, the more subtleties you notice. Ask yourself questions. What's going on around me? How does it make me feel? How do I react to life? How do others react to me? And What's happening right here, right now? Oftentimes, we react immediately out of fear. But as we pause to listen, it's like shining a flashlight into a dark forest. And we realize there's nothing to be fearful of. The voice in our head that knows the right thing to do has the opportunity to speak up. 3 years ago, I was biking down a side street in town, and I saw a car coming as I approached a cross street. The driver didn't see his stop sign, and he didn't see me. Thankfully, I slammed on my brakes in time. I didn't want you guys to get worried. But in reaction, I fumed profanities. That jerk, dumbass drivers, ah! And on and on and on. For 3 blocks, my mind was racing. Finally, I calmed down. I'd been so wrapped up in my own self-righteousness when I realized I'd run 2 stop signs of my own. Step 1, listen. Step 2, consider the impact of each little ripple. This is the think before you act step that I so graciously learned when I was 8. There's a question I like to ask myself that reveals the immediate tangible impact of each of our actions. What happens if 7 billion people did this? What if 7 billion people did this? What if 7 billion people yelled at the car driver or threw their Coke bottle out of the window? It piles up quickly. Not good. Now, what if we add a little compassion, like sprinkling spices on peanut butter? Compassion is as simple as a smile, like the woman in Tibet smiling at a stranger, or as a business person asking how can your company improve the lives of others? As environmental stewards, how can we leave this place cleaner than we found it? Step 2, consider the impact. And finally, step 3, take action, make the decision. Now that you've listened, reframed your perspective, how are you going to act? As we do this over and over, our brains form new habit patterns formed from compassion. And I ask you to think about how quickly these small, compassionate actions add up. I want to share another story about a friend of mine here in Madison who radically changed the course of history. Average Jack is mostly retired, portly, bald, and wears wire-rimmed glasses. When he met Earl 5 years ago, Earl was 16 years old, weighed 365 pounds, and was leaving the YMCA in the depths of winter to catch 3 buses to get home. Jack caught up with him on the sidewalk and insisted on driving him. They began to meet each week. Jack took an interest in Earl after learning about Earl's parentless upbringing. With Jack as his new mentor, Earl worked hard. He lost 100 pounds, and he began working a steady job. 3 months ago, despite his best efforts, Earl found himself unable to pay rent. Too proud to ask for help, he got sucked in by a payday lender and took out a loan at 500% interest. The payments compounded quickly into serious debt. When Jack found out, he paid off the entire loan and set up a no-interest payback plan with Earl. Sitting in Jack's office, Earl broke down sobbing. This was the first time in his life someone had cared about him. Now he's saving money, putting money into a 401k, and he has a chance. Jack listened, considered his impact, and took action. Each of these small actions at first just offering a ride. As Earl becomes a mentor to others in his community, think about how many underserved young men will forgo payday lenders and credit cards and be given a chance to make ends meet in our system. What will happen when their children are raised with love and support? And the ripples continue out. In Hawaii, there's an ancient act of compassion called ho'uponopono. When someone does something wrong, they can ask for forgiveness or reconciliation with ho'uponopono. Translated and simplified, ho'uponopono is 4 simple sentences we don't say enough. 4 phrases that can launch hurricanes. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. The exercise is simple. Begin with yourself. Say these 4 phrases to yourself. Then imagine a friend, a loved one, or someone who really irks you, and say these 4 phrases again. If you can say it with them, even better. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Even if in this small room, each of us cultivates a little more gratitude, love, humility, compassion, then we will walk out of here today, indeed, radically changing the course of history. I'd like to share a final story about a young boy born in a rural African village. The boy was small and named Rolilala, troublemaker. At the age of 9, the boy's father died. A family friend and nearby city official honored the father by adopting the young boy and eventually sending him to boarding school. In boarding school, the boy befriended a professor who saw his potential and ushered him towards higher education. Rolilala eventually took an interest in social justice, earned a law degree, and earned the respect of a network of friends. In 1990, this once young boy emerged from 27 years in prison as apartheid was finally dismantled in South Africa. Rolilala is a given name of Nelson Mandela. What if people along the way hadn't cared? We'd have a radically different world. There is no better time than now in the course of history to embrace this. Our Earth is dying. We use 1.5 planets worth of resources every year, more than it can regenerate annually. Human well-being is plummeting despite material success. Depression, diabetes, suicide, and more are taking the place of happiness. As our world grows, we must deepen our connection to our place in it. Otherwise, the future we create will be bleak. I have hope. Just as the sun rises each day and gives nourishment for life to grow, each of our actions gives nourishment to the next, right here, right now. As poet and author Alice Walker would say, we are the ones we've been waiting for. I'm starting today. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you.